After high school and throughout my 20s, I lived in a lot of different places. Sometimes it was for months at a time, like when I was a counselor at a summer camp or living in a dorm. Sometimes it was for a year or more, like when I was in grad school or in Costa Rica or when my husband and I lived in the UK. Between camps and music programs and schools and actual places where I was living, I would show up at a place and have to find a way to make it feel like I belonged there for however long. Especially in the most transitory periods of my life, going home meant going back to wherever I was living temporarily. Going home meant going back to my parents' house. When I was a college student, there were pictures I would put up on the wall with blue tack to remind myself of the people who cared about me while I was away. Later on, as a grown up, a friend gave me this advice when moving. Focus first on unpacking and setting up one room or even just one area. That way, when the rest of your space is chaotic, you can go into that area and know you're home. What is something you have to do to make a space feel like home, like you belong? Maybe it's a particular stuffed animal or photo or piece of artwork. Maybe it's making your bed, or maybe it's cooking something familiar so the place takes on the smell of home. Sometimes it's not so easy. Maybe you know the space is only temporary. Maybe it feels like loss rather than excitement. Maybe you've got roommates who are less than welcoming, or maybe there's a lot of structural work to do. My dad once said to me, "Well, you have to live somewhere." His wise words helped me temper my expectations of home and figure out what was really important as I moved from place to place, and especially as my husband and I wrestled with the fixer-upper we moved into here in Ann Arbor. Something I've thought about a lot in the midst of the many renovations we've taken on is the fact that we're only caretakers of the places we occupy. So many times we've encountered work that was done poorly that we had to undo. And so as we've gone forward with our own improvements, we've tried to do work in a way that can be built upon rather than torn up. We're thinking about those who will come after us. In terms of our yard, we've also been thinking about the insects, birds, and other animals who co-inhabit this land with us and have dug up a lot of our lawn to make space for native pollinator plants that provide food and shelter. There's a tendency, especially here in the US, of thinking of the spaces we occupy in terms of absolute ownership, that I can do whatever I want with my space or my land. But what if we thought about it more in terms of a chain of custody, that I'm connected to those around me, that there will be someone who will come after me, and then I have a responsibility to them, even if I will never meet them? Where are you staying? The disciples asked Jesus. But this question isn't just about a place to crash for the night. The Greek word used here, meno, really means to abide, dwell, or remain. It's the same word the author of John uses to describe the Spirit remaining on Jesus after it descends to him earlier in the story. The Spirit abides, the Spirit dwells with Jesus. Where now will Jesus abide? Where are you dwelling? Where are you abiding? Where are you remaining? For John's disciples, who after this story become Jesus' disciples, they were teenagers and young adults, and their lives were transitory. They didn't own land. They didn't have a home that didn't belong to their parents. Although maybe they really were just asking Jesus about where he would crash that night, John's gospel spends the rest of its narrative responding to this question: what does Jesus think is important? Where is he going to spend his time and energy? Jesus had also decided to invest in a fixer-upper. He didn't set out trying to start a whole new religion. He was Jewish and he was trying to reform the Judaism of his time, trying to remind his people that the law exists to facilitate healthy community, not as a checklist to complete. But Jesus didn't come here to save a religion. He came to create beloved community and in the process provide salvation to all. In contrast to the story of Noah and the flood, God and Jesus came to live here with us to experience our humanity. He looked around and said, "This place has good bones. I'm going to dwell here." The church, too, often seems like a place that still has good bones, but sometimes you have to squint really hard. It requires commitment and vision and a sense of purpose from those who choose to dwell within it. It requires the willingness to tear up what doesn't work and rebuild with stronger and better material. It requires a willingness to let go of the things that no longer serve and reimagine what it could look like while still making sure it feels like home. One of my colleagues once said that being a pastor is like throwing a party every week and seeing if anyone will show up. And especially at a church where we provide a meal after the service, it's important to think about who will be here to make sure we have enough food, but not too much, and that dietary needs will be met. But that's not all of it. It's also important to think about why we gather. We ask, what are people looking for in a community like ours? Why would this be the right place for them? Where would we choose to stay? Where would we feel at home? Because even though the world has changed a lot since Jesus' time, a lot of things simply haven't. We still need to eat together. We still need to be inspired. We still need to come together to find meaning. And when we are in the midst of uncertain or difficult times, we still seek out community and support. The world has changed a lot since Jesus' time, but it also hasn't changed. We still hurt each other. We still turn to violence. We still try to wield power over one another. We still worry too much about the scarcity of resources and fail to share what we do have. We still need to be reminded again and again that our original sin is the tendency to think we are the center of the universe, and to be reminded again and again that our salvation lies in looking outward. There's a poem by Maggie Smith called Good Bones that has been making the rounds on social media throughout these past years of uncertainty and tension. She writes, life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways. 1,000 deliciously ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible. And for every kind stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I am trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real shithole chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. God chose to join us in our human lives, not at a perfect time, but at a time when things were uncertain and vulnerable. God chose to come to be with us in the midst of our humanity, not as a powerful king, but as a stateless peasant. Even now, in the midst of all the ways we fail to love one another, God looks around and says, this place has good bones. I will dwell with this people. We have only to look at the headlines to know that this world is far from perfect, and that often we are making it worse. We have only to look at the headlines to see that the people in power are like reckless contractors saying, I'll be gone before my poor workmanship becomes a problem. But God is here in the midst of us, in the midst of communities that push back and demand better, in the midst of communities that are willing to stand up and show that love is the better way, that we know we have a responsibility to one another and to those who will come after us. God is here in each one of us as we gather and mourn and plan, as we step into a vision of a future that chooses again and again to invest, to care, to dwell. Where are you remaining? Where are you abiding? Where are you dwelling? God's disciples ask Jesus. Come with me and see, Jesus says. Amen.